She lied about everything to investigate him. Now he knows the truth. Louisa's hand trembled as she positioned the hidden camera inside Bennett Collier's office, her reflection caught in the frame of his family photos. The door opened behind her. She spun around, pulse hammering, to find him standing there with those impossibly kind eyes that made her job so much harder. He smiled, completely unaware she was there to destroy him. How had protecting people become the same thing as betraying them? "Louisa?" Bennett's voice was warm, genuinely pleased. "I didn't expect anyone still here." The camera sat on his desk, barely concealed behind donor files. One glance, and he would know. One question, and her entire operation would unravel. "I was just leaving you a welcome note," she said, the lie sliding out with practiced ease. 14 years as a detective had taught her how to wear falsehoods like second skin. Bennett Collier was not what she expected. The white man standing in the doorway wore his wealth differently than the suspects she usually investigated. At 41, he carried himself with quiet confidence rather than arrogance. His gray eyes reflected genuine warmth, and his dark hair showed distinguished silver at the temples. Tall, easily 6'2", with the kind of build that suggested actual work rather than expensive gym memberships. "That's thoughtful," he said, moving closer. "But you don't need to thank me. Your resume spoke for itself. We're lucky to have you as our new coordinator." Louisa Chambers, 35 years old and currently playing nonprofit professional rather than financial crimes detective, managed a smile. She was acutely aware of how she must look to him. A black woman with natural hair twisted into an elegant updo, wearing professional attire that walked the line between competent and approachable. What he couldn't see was her badge hidden at home or the recording device sewn into her jacket. Bennett touched her elbow gently, guiding her from the desk toward the door. The contact was brief, professional, but it sent unexpected awareness through her. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "The foundation keeps the kitchen stocked for late nights. Come on, keep me company." Every instinct screamed at her to decline, but Detective Frank Walker's voice echoed from this morning's briefing. "Get close to him. These billionaires don't get rich by being honest." So she followed Bennett down the hallway, watching how he nodded to the security guard by name, how he held doors without thinking, how he seemed utterly comfortable despite wealth that should have created distance. The foundation offices occupied the 10th floor of a downtown building, but it felt nothing like the cold corporate spaces she'd raided during previous investigations. The walls displayed photos of smiling families, children in programs, veterans receiving housing keys. This wasn't a money laundering front. It couldn't be, except Detective Walker was rarely wrong. An anonymous tip had pointed to the Collier Foundation as a funnel for offshore accounts. Large donations disappeared into vague categories, board members with questionable connections, the kind of smoke that usually meant fire. "So what made you interested in nonprofit work?" Bennett asked as they entered a cozy kitchen. Louisa leaned against the counter, constructing her cover story from bones of truth. "I grew up in foster care, saw organizations that talked about helping but didn't actually change anything, wanted to be part of something real." The foster care part was true. Her mother had died when Louisa was 8, no father in the picture, and she'd spent 10 years bouncing between homes that ranged from neglectful to indifferent. She'd learned early how to read people, how to make herself useful, how to disappear when necessary. Skills that served her well as a detective, skills serving her even better now. Bennett turned from the refrigerator with sandwich ingredients, something in his expression softening. "I'm sorry you went through that. Foster care fails too many kids." He started assembling food. "That's why we focus on family support services. Keep families together when possible. Provide real resources rather than temporary fixes." Despite herself, Louisa felt genuine curiosity. "That's not typical." "No," he agreed. "Most foundations treat symptoms. We're trying to address causes." He looked up, gray eyes holding hers. "My parents immigrated here when I was 12. My father worked construction until an accident left him disabled. My mother cleaned offices at night. I watched them struggle because one bad break nearly destroyed everything." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't performance. This was someone who actually cared. "How did you end up here?" she asked, gesturing around them. Scholarships, student loans, luck? He handed her a plate. Built a tech company, sold it for more money than anyone needs. Kept thinking about my parents, about how many families are one accident away from losing everything. He smiled, but old pain flickered behind it. So I channel 70% of my income into the foundation. Try to build the safety net that didn't exist for my family. This man was supposed to be a criminal. Walker had been certain, but standing here, listening to Bennett's story, seeing genuine emotion in his face, her detective's instincts were sending different signals entirely. That's incredible, she said carefully. Most people at my level didn't grow up watching their mother cry over bills. Bennett's voice was quiet. I never want to forget what that felt like. They ate in comfortable silence. Then Bennett asked, what about you? Besides foster care, what shapes who you are? She couldn't give him too much truth, but too many lies would trip her up eventually. I learned to be independent, she said, to trust my own judgment, and I learned that people aren't always what they seem. That sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. Something flickered across Bennett's face, understanding maybe, or recognition of a kindred wound. That's a hard lesson, he said softly, but a useful one. When Bennett walked her to the elevator, when he smiled and said he was glad she'd be part of the team, she felt the weight of what she was doing settle like stones in her chest. See you tomorrow, Louisa. Tomorrow, she echoed. Alone in the descending elevator, she released a shaking breath. Bennett Collier didn't feel like a criminal. He felt like someone genuinely trying to do good in the world, and she was here to destroy him. The next week passed in observation and documentation. Louisa met the key players in Bennett's world, each one adding layers to her understanding. Leo Morelli was Bennett's right hand, a sharp-eyed Italian-American in his late 30s who managed operations with military precision. From their first interaction, Louisa sensed he didn't trust her. His questions were too pointed, his gaze too assessing. So you came from where before this? Leo asked during her second day, reviewing her fabricated resume. Various non-profit positions, Louisa said smoothly. Never quite found the right fit. Until now? Until now. Leo's expression suggested he wasn't convinced. Louisa made a mental note to be extra careful around him. Then there was Gloria Hayes. A black woman in her early 40s with warm eyes and maternal presence, Gloria ran the foundation's main community center in the neighborhood where she'd once been homeless. Single mother of 3, lost her job and apartment, spent 6 months living in her car before the Collier Foundation's housing program gave her a second chance. Bennett saved my life, Gloria told Louisa on day 3, giving her a tour. Not with a handout, with a hand up. Job training, stable housing, child care support. Most places talk about helping. Bennett actually does it. Louisa walked through the center, seeing children in after-school programs, mothers in job workshops, veterans meeting with housing counselors. The operation was impressive and seemingly genuine. Every person had similar stories. Real help, real change. She reported this to Detective Walker at their weekly check-in, meeting him in a coffee shop across town. You're getting too close, Walker said, his weathered face set in disapproval. The man was 53. Career law enforcement, and carried cynicism born from too many disappointments. I can hear it in your voice. I'm being thorough. Building credibility takes time. Building credibility is fine. Forgetting why you're there is not. Walker leaned forward. These billionaires are all the same, Chambers. They throw money at charity to hide the money they're stealing. Collier's just better at the performance. What if he's not performing? What if the foundation is legitimate? Walker's expression hardened. The tip came from inside his organization. Someone knows he's dirty. Your job is to prove it, not to be charmed by his sob story. My job is to find the truth. Your job is to close this case. Don't forget which side you're on. Back at the foundation, she dove into financial records, hours of spreadsheets and donation records. What she found was impeccable documentation. Every dollar accounted for, legitimate grants and programs, careful oversight. The only anomaly was Carolyn Westbrook, a board member who seemed to have unusual access to certain accounts. Louisa flagged it mentally, but kept searching for evidence that would implicate Bennett, because that's what Walker wanted. That's what her career advancement depended on. But late at night, working alone, she would catch herself watching Bennett through her planted cameras, watching him stay late to help with paperwork he could have delegated, watching him take calls from beneficiaries, treating each person with genuine attention, watching him laugh with Leo, his whole face transforming with unguarded joy. He didn't act like a criminal. He acted like someone who actually cared, and that terrified her more than any confession could have. By the end of the first week, Louisa had to admit what her instincts had been screaming. Bennett Collier was innocent. Whatever money was moving through questionable channels, he wasn't the one moving it, which meant her investigation was targeting the wrong person, which meant she should tell Walker to redirect the case, which meant walking away from Bennett before she got any more tangled in the attraction she absolutely should not be feeling. But she didn't walk away. She told herself she needed more evidence, told herself she was protecting him by staying close, told herself a lot of things that felt true enough to quiet the voice whispering she was lying to everyone, including herself. Friday evening of her first week, everything shifted. Louisa was organizing donation files in the records room, a small space that gave her access to documents she needed. She reached for a folder on a high shelf. At the exact moment, Bennett reached for the same one. Their hands collided. The contact was brief, accidental, nothing remarkable, except his fingers brushed across hers, and instead of pulling away immediately, both froze. The touch lingered. Maybe 2 heartbeats. The folder was forgotten. Louisa looked up and found Bennett's gray eyes locked on hers with an intensity that stole breath from her lungs. The air in the small room seemed to thicken, charged with something electric and dangerous. His hand was still covering hers, warm, strong. "Sorry," Bennett said, but his voice had dropped to that low register that meant he was feeling something he wasn't saying. "I didn't mean to, He trailed off, but he still hadn't moved his hand. "It's okay," Louisa managed. Her training was supposed to keep her calm under pressure, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for the way her entire nervous system seemed to light up from a simple touch. Bennett pulled back slowly, deliberately, his fingers trailing across hers in a way that suggested he was as reluctant to break contact as she was. When his hand finally left hers, the absence felt like loss. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yes," she lied. "Just surprised." "Me too," he admitted, and the honesty in those 2 words made everything worse. He wasn't hiding what he felt, wasn't pretending something hadn't shifted between them. They stood too close in the small space, neither moving away. Louisa was acutely aware of his height, how she'd have to tilt her head back to kiss him. Where had that thought come from? "Louisa," Bennett said her name like he was tasting it, trying to figure something out. "Can I ask you something?" This was dangerous. Every instinct told her to deflect, to leave, to rebuild the professional distance that had just evaporated. "Okay. Do you feel—" He paused, searching for words. "Is this just me? This awareness?" She should lie, should laugh it off, should absolutely not tell him the truth. "It's not just you." His expression shifted, something like relief and concern mixing together. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I'm technically your boss, and I would never want you to feel pressured." "You're not pressuring me," she interrupted, "but this is complicated." "Very complicated," he agreed. They stood there for another moment, the truth of mutual attraction hanging between them like something alive and fragile. Then Bennett stepped back, deliberately putting space between them. "I should let you finish up here," he said, his voice still carrying that low, intimate quality. "Have a good weekend, Louisa." "You too, Bennett." He left, and she stood alone in the records room, fingers still tingling. This was bad. She was falling for her target, which violated every rule of undercover work. She needed to report this to Walker, needed to request reassignment before she compromised the entire investigation. Instead, she touched her fingers where his had been and admitted she didn't want to leave, that she wanted more of whatever this was, regardless of how wrong it might be. Detective Louisa Chambers, decorated officer with 14 years of spotless service, stood in that records room and made the first choice that would ultimately unravel everything she thought she knew about duty, justice, and who she was supposed to be. She chose to stay. Have you ever had to question everything you believed about someone when the person you were supposed to distrust showed you nothing but kindness? Tell me in the comments if you've ever misjudged someone, and let me know where you're watching from. If this story is already pulling at your heartstrings, hit that subscribe button because Louise's journey is just beginning. The following days were exercises in restraint neither Bennett nor Louisa were particularly good at. They maintained professional distance in meetings, kept conversations work-focused, and generally behaved like two people who absolutely were not thinking about each other constantly. It wasn't working. Tuesday morning, Bennett brought her coffee prepared exactly how she'd mentioned liking it during a casual conversation 3 days prior. "You remembered?" she said, accepting the cup. "I remember everything you tell me," he replied, and the weight of that statement settled between them like a promise neither should be making. Their fingers brushed during the exchange. Neither pulled away immediately. Leo Morelli watched this interaction from across the office with narrowed eyes that missed nothing. But then Bennett smiled at her, and careful seemed impossible. Wednesday brought a staff meeting where Louisa challenged Bennett's timeline for expanding their housing program. She had legitimate concerns based on financial data, and she wasn't about to stay silent. "The timeline's too aggressive," she said, pointing to the projection. "You're assuming perfect conditions. Real implementation needs buffer time." Bennett's jaw tightened, intensity flaring in his eyes. "We have families waiting. Every month we delay is another month they're struggling. And if we overextend and the program fails, they'll be worse off. Sustainable growth matters more than speed." The room went quiet. Other staff members looked between them, sensing the charge in the air. "Can we talk about this privately?" Bennett asked, voice controlled but barely. "Of course." They moved to the hallway after the meeting ended, and the moment the door closed, the tension that had been building exploded into argument. "You undermined me in there," Bennett said. "I disagreed with you. There's a difference. In front of the entire staff. Because I'm right, and you're letting your passion override practical considerations. My passion is why this foundation works, and my practical approach is why it'll keep working." They were standing too close again, voices raised, breathing hard from more than anger. The professional disagreement had somehow transformed into something else. Louisa could see the pulse beating at Bennett's throat, could feel the heat radiating from his body, could sense the exact moment when his frustration shifted into something that had nothing to do with expansion timelines. "You drive me crazy," he said, but it didn't sound like a complaint. "The feeling's mutual." "Louisa," whatever he was about to say got interrupted by Leo clearing his throat at the end of the hallway. They jumped apart, and Louisa felt heat flood her face. Leo's expression was knowing and deeply disapproving. "Bennett, you have a call," Leo said flatly, "from the mayor's office." "Right, thanks." Bennett looked at Louisa, something unresolved still crackling between them. "We'll continue this later." "Later," she agreed. She watched him walk away with Leo, who glanced back once with a look that very clearly said, "I'm watching you." Louisa leaned against the wall and tried to remember how to breathe normally. The awareness between them was building with every interaction, every accidental touch, every moment they spent pretending they weren't thinking about each other. And underneath it all, the lie of her identity sat like poison. Every genuine moment between them was built on her deception. She went back to her office and pulled up the financial files, determined to find evidence that would either clear him completely or prove Walker right. What she found made everything more complicated. Carolyn Westbrook's name kept appearing in relation to offshore accounts, small amounts of money disguised as administrative costs, but moving in patterns that looked wrong to Louisa's trained eye. This wasn't Bennett's signature on the transfers. This was Carolyn's. If Carolyn was skimming from the foundation, then she might also be creating false trails to frame Bennett, which would explain the anonymous tip Walker had received. She should tell Walker immediately, should report that the real criminal was Carolyn, not Bennett. But Walker had made it clear he didn't want to hear evidence of Bennett's innocence. The DA wanted a billionaire fraud case to make headlines. Her career advancement depended on giving them what they wanted. Louisa sat at her desk, staring at the evidence of Bennett's innocence and Carolyn's guilt, and felt the foundations of her entire world begin to crack. She'd built her identity on being one of the good guys, on seeking justice regardless of politics or pressure. But now Walker was asking her to do the opposite, to frame an innocent man for career benefits, to let real corruption continue because it wasn't the corruption they'd wanted to find. And somewhere in the middle of all this, she'd started falling for Bennett Collier. Her phone buzzed, a text from Walker. "Weekly check-in tomorrow. Hope you have progress to report." Louisa stared at the message, then at the financial evidence on her screen, then at the closed door separating her from Bennett's world just down the hall. And she made a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. She wasn't going to tell Walker about Carolyn yet, wasn't going to redirect the investigation until she had ironclad evidence, wasn't going to do anything that might put Bennett at risk. She was choosing him over her career, over her orders, over everything she'd built her identity on for 14 years. And the terrifying part was how right it felt. Thursday evening, she stayed late working on grant applications. So did Bennett. They ended up in her office around 8, reviewing documents, sitting close enough that their shoulders kept brushing. Every touch was electric. Every glance felt weighted with things neither was saying. "This section needs work," Bennett said, leaning across her to point at a paragraph, his arm pressed against hers. He didn't move it. "I know," Louisa murmured. "The impact metrics are weak. We could strengthen them by including the longitudinal data from Gloria's center," she finished. He turned his head to look at her, and suddenly their faces were inches apart. His eyes dropped to her mouth, and she forgot how to breathe. The professional conversation evaporated. "Louisa," he said softly, "we need to talk about this." "I know. I can't stop thinking about you." "I know," she said again, because she couldn't think about anything else either. "This is complicated. You work for me, and I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position." She touched his face, silencing him. The gesture was bold, probably stupid, definitely unprofessional. But she couldn't help it. Bennett's eyes closed briefly at the contact, like her touch caused him physical relief. When he opened them again, the heat in his gaze made her feel like she was burning. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. "Tell me this is a bad idea, and I'll walk away right now." She should. She absolutely should. "Don't stop." He kissed her. Finally, after days of building tension and stolen glances and accidental touches, he closed the distance and kissed her. It started gentle, tentative, giving her room to pull away. But Louisa didn't want gentle. She'd spent her entire life being careful, controlled, keeping everyone at arm's length, and suddenly she was tired of it. She kissed him back with everything she'd been holding back, and Bennett made a sound low in his throat that sent heat flooding through her body. His hands came up to frame her face, tilting her head to deepen the kiss, and she let herself fall into it completely. This was wrong. This was a betrayal of her investigation. This was going to end badly. But right now, wrapped in Bennett's arms with his mouth on hers and his heart beating against her chest, she couldn't make herself care. They kissed like people who'd been waiting far too long, like they were making up for all the restraint, like they might never get another chance. Time seemed to lose meaning. There was only the sensation of his lips, the taste of him, the way his hands shook slightly as they moved into her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Bennett pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm falling for you," he admitted, voice rough. "I know it's too fast and too complicated and probably a terrible idea, but I'm falling for you." The words hit her like physical blows, because he was falling for someone who didn't exist, for Louisa Chambers, the foundation coordinator, not Louisa Chambers, the detective investigating him. "Bennett," she started, but she didn't know how to finish. "It's okay," he said, misreading her hesitation. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. Wanted to be honest about what I'm feeling." Honest. The word twisted like a knife in her chest. He was being honest while she was lying about everything. "I need to tell you something," she said, knowing she was about to blow up her entire investigation, but unable to keep deceiving him. His office phone rang, cutting through the moment. They both jumped. Bennett looked at the phone, then at her, clearly torn. "You should answer it," Louisa said, relieved and disappointed in equal measure. He kissed her once more, quick and sweet, then moved to answer the phone. Louisa gathered her things with shaking hands, needing space to think, to process, to figure out what the hell she was going to do now. She drove home in a daze, her lips still tingling, her mind racing through impossible scenarios. She couldn't keep lying to him, but she couldn't tell him the truth without destroying any chance they might have, and she couldn't walk away because she was already in too deep. Detective Louisa Chambers, who'd spent 14 years maintaining perfect emotional control, sat in her car outside her apartment and admitted that she was completely, utterly, disastrously in love with the man she was supposed to be investigating. And she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Chapter 2. Friday morning brought Leo Morelli waiting at her desk, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. Her detective instincts kicked in immediately. She kept her expression neutral as she set down her bag. "About? About the fact that you're not who you're pretending to be." Ice flooded her veins. "Your questions about financial systems go way beyond a coordinator's scope. The way you're always working late, accessing files you don't need for your job." He leaned forward. "I know you're hiding something. I just haven't figured out what yet." "I'm thorough," she said carefully. "Bennett appreciates that." "Bennett is blinded by his feelings for you." "I'm not." Leo studied her. "If you're here to hurt him, to use him, to take advantage of his trust, I will make sure you regret it. Do you understand?" The loyalty in his voice was absolute. Despite the threat, Louisa found herself respecting it. "I'm not here to hurt him," she said, and realized she meant it completely. Whatever happened with the investigation, she would protect Bennett, even if it meant destroying her own career. "We'll see," Leo said, and walked away. Too many people were getting too close to the truth. She needed to wrap this up, needed to prove Bennett's innocence and Carolyn's guilt, and get out before everything collapsed. The problem was, she didn't want to leave. That evening, Bennett invited her to his penthouse for dinner. Tyler would be there, he said, his 16-year-old nephew who'd been living with him since Bennett's brother died in a construction accident. The invitation felt significant, like being welcomed into the inner circle of his life. She said yes anyway. Bennett's penthouse was not what she expected. Instead of ostentatious wealth, she found a space that felt lived in and comfortable. Family photos covered every surface. Tyler's school projects cluttered the dining table. The refrigerator was covered in college brochures and basketball schedules. Tyler Collier was a tall, lanky teenager with his uncle's gray eyes and an easy smile. He greeted Louisa with genuine warmth and immediately launched into a story about his basketball game. "Uncle Bennett missed it because of some donor meeting," Tyler said, rolling his eyes with affectionate exasperation. "I told you I'd make the next one," Bennett said, ruffling Tyler's hair in a gesture so casually paternal it made Louisa's chest ache. This was the man she was investigating. This man who'd rearranged his entire life to raise his orphan nephew. Dinner was Chinese takeout, an easy conversation. Tyler talked about college applications, his voice carrying equal parts excitement and anxiety. Bennett asked thoughtful questions, offered advice without pushing, and looked at his nephew with such obvious pride that Louisa felt like an intruder on something sacred. "What about you, Louisa?" Tyler asked. "Where'd you go to college?" "Community college for 2 years, then State University," she said, which was actually true. "Worked full-time while studying. Took me 6 years to finish." "That's impressive," Tyler said. "Uncle Bennett did something similar." They finished dinner and Tyler excused himself to work on homework, leaving Bennett and Louisa alone. Bennett moved closer on the couch, not quite touching, but near enough that she could feel his warmth. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said quietly. "For meeting Tyler. He's the most important person in my life." "He's a great kid," Louisa said honestly. "You've done an amazing job with him." "I'm terrified I'm screwing it up every day." Bennett's laugh was self-deprecating. "Parenting wasn't exactly in my 5-year plan, but when my brother died," he trailed off, old pain flickering across his face. "Tyler needed someone, and I was all he had left. You gave up a lot for him. I gained more." Bennett looked at her. "He gave me purpose beyond just making money, reminded me what actually matters." Louisa touched his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Your brother would be proud of you. Of both of you." I hope so. He squeezed her hand. I think about him every day. Bennett turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. How are you so understanding? So patient with all my baggage? Because I have my own baggage, she wanted to say. Because I understand what it means to lose people. Because I'm falling in love with you and it terrifies me. Instead, she said, everyone has baggage. Yours just happens to come with a really impressive charitable foundation. He laughed, and then he was kissing her again, soft and sweet and full of promise. They stayed like that for a while, trading kisses and quiet conversation, until Tyler emerged from his room and made exaggerated gagging sounds. You two are gross, he announced cheerfully. I'm going to bed before I need therapy. Use protection, Tyler shouted from his room, and Bennett's face went crimson. I'm so sorry, he said to Louisa, who was laughing too hard to respond. He's perfect, she managed. You're both perfect. The word hung between them, and Bennett's expression shifted into something more serious. Stay, he said quietly. Just stay. Talk to me. I'm not ready for tonight to end. So she stayed. They talked for hours, sprawled on his couch, about everything and nothing. He told her about building his company, about the terror of having more money than he knew what to do with, about the ex-fiancée who'd left because she couldn't compete with his mission. She said, I loved the foundation more than I loved her, Bennett admitted. And maybe she was right. I was so consumed with building something meaningful that I forgot to make room for her. Relationships require two people making room for each other. I know, but it made me cautious, made me afraid to let anyone get close again. He looked at her. Until you. The words settled like a weight on her chest. Until you. Until the woman lying about her identity. Until the detective investigating him. Until someone who would inevitably break his heart when the truth came out. I'm not who you think I am, she said quietly, testing the waters of confession. None of us are exactly who people think we are, Bennett replied. We're all performing some version of ourselves, hiding our vulnerabilities. What are you terrified of? That I'll wake up one day and realize I've wasted my life chasing meaning instead of actually living, that I'll push away everyone who cares about me. He traced his fingers along her arm absently. That I'll lose you before I even really have you. Bennett, I know it's too fast. I know we barely know each other, but I feel something with you that I haven't felt in years, maybe ever, and it scares the hell out of me. Louisa's vision blurred with tears she couldn't afford to shed, because he was trusting her with his fears, his vulnerabilities, his truth, and she was repaying that trust with lies. You won't mess it up, she whispered, knowing she was the one who would destroy this. He pulled her closer, tucking her against his side, and they sat like that until she finally left near midnight. Bennett walked her to the elevator, kissed her goodnight like he was memorizing the taste of her, and made her promise to text when she got home safely. In her car, Louisa sat in the parking garage and let the tears finally fall. She'd crossed so many lines tonight, had let herself imagine a future with Bennett and Tyler, had let herself fall completely, irrevocably in love with a man who didn't even know her real name. Her phone buzzed. Detective Walker. Need update. Call me. She stared at the message, then deleted it. She would deal with Walker later. The weekend passed in a strange limbo. Louisa spent it reviewing evidence, trying to build an airtight case against Carolyn Westbrook that would clear Bennett completely. She documented every suspicious transfer, every questionable account access, every piece of proof that pointed away from Bennett and toward the real criminal. By Sunday night, she had enough. Enough to prove Bennett's innocence, enough to redirect the investigation, enough to close this case. Except moving on would mean leaving Bennett, and she wasn't ready for that. Monday morning, Bennett appeared at her desk with coffee and a proposal. Come with me this weekend, he said, to the rural community center. I need your input on the expansion plans. Just us? She asked, heart hammering. Just us. Well, and Gloria Hayes. She's driving up to show you around. His smile turned sheepish. I might have mentioned to her that you're important to me. Important to him. The words wrapped around her heart like a promise she had no right to keep. I'd love to, she said. The week dragged by in anticipation and dread. Louisa continued documenting Carolyn's crimes while avoiding Walker's increasingly insistent calls. She told herself she'd report everything after the weekend. Wednesday evening brought the incident that shifted everything. Louisa was working late at the foundation, Tyler was volunteering in the tutoring room, and the security guard had stepped out, which is when two men with masks burst through the door demanding cash donations. Everything that happened next occurred in heartbeats. Louisa assessed the situation with trained instincts. Two suspects, one armed with a pistol and one with a knife, neither particularly professional. Tyler was frozen in the doorway, visible to the suspects. Three other volunteers cowered behind desks. The man with the pistol swung toward Tyler, and Louisa moved. She crossed the distance in seconds. She grabbed the gunman's wrist, twisted it with precise force, heard the weapon clatter to the floor. A quick strike to his knee sent him down. The knife-wielding accomplice lunged at her and she sidestepped, using his momentum to send him stumbling into a desk. "Tyler, get back!" she shouted, her voice carrying command that came from years of controlling crime scenes. The teenager scrambled away as she subdued the first suspect with a textbook restraint hold. The whole encounter lasted maybe 30 seconds. By the time security returned with police backup, both suspects were restrained, no one was hurt, and Louisa was standing over them with her pulse barely elevated. Except she couldn't file a police report, because that would require explaining how a foundation coordinator had law enforcement training. Leo Morelli stood in the doorway, having arrived just in time to see the end. His expression was knowing and deeply suspicious. Tyler was staring at her wide-eyed, and Bennett, who arrived minutes later after Leo called him, looked at her with a mixture of awe and concern. "Are you okay?" Bennett demanded, hands framing her face, checking for injuries with shaking fingers. Leo said there was a robbery, "I'm fine," she assured him. "Everyone's fine." "You took down two armed men," Tyler said, voice high with residual adrenaline. "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen." Bennett pulled her into a fierce embrace, and she could feel his heart hammering. "You could have been killed," he said into her hair. "You should have hidden. I couldn't let them hurt Tyler." He pulled back to look at her, and something in his expression had shifted, deepened. "Where did you learn to do that?" The lie came automatically. "Self-defense classes. I told you foster care wasn't always safe." Leo made a sound that suggested he didn't believe a word. The police took statements, praised Louisa's brave actions, and left with the suspects. And through it all, Louisa felt the weight of her deception growing heavier. That night, Bennett insisted on taking both Louisa and Tyler to his penthouse. Tyler was still riding the adrenaline high. Bennett was quieter, watching Louisa with an intensity that made her nervous. After Tyler went to bed, Bennett pulled her onto the balcony. The city sprawled below them. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood like that for a while, not speaking. "I was terrified," he finally said. "When Leo called, when he said there were men with guns and you were there, I couldn't breathe until I saw you were okay. I know, I'm sorry. Don't apologize for being incredible." He turned her to face him. "But that level of skill, that kind of training, that's not just self-defense classes, Louisa." Her stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't care what secrets you're keeping. I don't care if there are parts of your past you're not ready to share. I just need you to know that whatever it is, whenever you're ready to tell me, I'll understand." The trust in his voice nearly broke her. He was giving her an opening, a chance to confess everything, and she was too much of a coward to take it. "Thank you," she whispered instead, "for trusting me." He kissed her, and it felt different than before. More desperate, more urgent, like he was trying to convince himself she was real and safe. Louisa kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all the words she couldn't say into the contact. They made it to his bedroom through heated kisses and fumbling steps. Clothes fell away between urgent touches and whispered words. This was different from their kiss in her office. This was need and relief, and the aftermath of terror transforming into affirmation of life. "Are you sure?" Bennett asked, even as his hands trembled against her skin. "I'm sure," she breathed and pulled him down to her. They came together in a tangle of limbs and racing hearts, taking time to explore despite the urgency driving them. Bennett touched her like she was precious, like he was memorizing every curve and sound. Louisa let herself feel everything fully for the first time in years, let herself be vulnerable in a way she'd never allowed before. It was intense and overwhelming and stopped just short of complete consummation when reality intruded in the form of Tyler knocking on the door. "Uncle Bennett, I can't sleep. Can we talk?" They froze, tangled together, breathing hard. Bennett closed his eyes with a mixture of frustration and affection. "Worst timing in history," he muttered. "Or best," Louisa said, suddenly glad for the interruption. "This is moving fast." "Too fast," she kissed him softly. "No, but maybe we take a breath. Make sure we're ready." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. They dressed quickly, and Bennett went to talk to Tyler while Louisa sat on his bed and tried to remember how to breathe normally. She'd almost made love to Bennett Collier while lying about everything. The guilt was crushing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Walker. "Last chance, Chambers. Report tomorrow or I'm reassigning the case and recommending disciplinary action." Louisa stared at the message, then at the closed door where she could hear Bennett's gentle voice comforting his nephew. And she knew with absolute certainty that she was done following orders that went against everything she believed in. She texted back, "I'll come by in the morning, have important developments to share." Then she turned off her phone and curled up in Bennett's bed, waiting for him to return. When he finally returned, Tyler settled and sleeping, he slid into bed beside her and pulled her close. "Stay," he said simply. "Tonight, tomorrow, as long as you want." "Bennett, there are things about me you don't know." "Then tell me. Or don't. But stay anyway." So she stayed, wrapped in his arms, knowing this peace couldn't last but unwilling to let it go. They fell asleep tangled together, and for one night, Louisa let herself believe that maybe, somehow, this could work out. Friday morning came too soon. Louisa woke in Bennett's bed, his arm draped over her waist, and felt the weight of her deception like stones on her chest. Today she had to meet Walker, had to figure out how to navigate between her duty as an officer and her feelings for Bennett. But first, there was coffee, and Tyler's cheerful teasing, and Bennett's soft smiles across the breakfast table. "So," Tyler said, grinning at her over his cereal, "are you going to be my aunt now?" "Tyler," Bennett said warningly, but he was smiling too. "I'm just saying, if you two keep making hard eyes at each other, we should probably start planning the wedding." "Eat your breakfast," Bennett told him, but his hand found Louisa's under the table and squeezed. Later, after Tyler left for school and Bennett went to get dressed for work, Louisa stood in his kitchen and made the call she'd been avoiding. "Chambers," Walker answered immediately. "About damn time. I need to meet, have the evidence you wanted." "Good. My office, 10 a.m. She hung up and leaned against the counter, trying to gather courage for what came next. Because she was going to tell Walker the truth, that Bennett was innocent, that Carolyn was the real criminal, and that she wouldn't participate in framing an honest man. She was also going to tender her resignation. Because there was no way Walker would let her continue as a detective after she refused to follow orders. Her career was over the moment she chose to protect Bennett instead of advancing the case Walker wanted. And somehow, she was okay with that. Because protecting Bennett, protecting the Foundation's work, protecting Tyler, that felt more important than any career advancement. "Ready to go?" Bennett asked, emerging from his room in a suit. "We can ride together if you want." She looked at him, this man who'd somehow become everything, and made her decision. "Actually, I need to run an errand this morning, but I'll see you at the office after." "Everything okay?" "It will be," she said, and hoped that was true. She kissed him goodbye, gathered her things, and drove to the precinct for what would probably be the last time as an active detective. Her hands were steady on the wheel. Her resolve was firm. She'd spent 14 years building her career, but she'd spent the last few weeks falling in love. And love, it turned out, was worth more than any badge. The meeting with Walker went exactly as she expected. He listened to her evidence against Carolyn, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Then she told him she wouldn't plant evidence against Bennett, that she wouldn't participate in framing an innocent man, and that she was resigning effective immediately. "You're throwing away your career for a billionaire?" Walker demanded. "I'm protecting my integrity," Louisa corrected, "something you used to care about before politics became more important than justice." You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. She placed her badge and gun on his desk. I'll finish documenting the evidence against Carolyn Westbrook. Then I'm done. Walker's expression was cold. You realize I have to report this, that refusing a direct order has consequences? I realize. Do what you have to do. She left the precinct with her head high and her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. She'd made her choice. Now she just had to tell Bennett the truth and hope he could forgive her for the lies that came before. But first, there was this weekend trip to the rural community center. One last memory before everything changed. One last chance to be with him before she had to confess who she really was. Louisa drove to the foundation, parked, and took a deep breath. Whatever came next, she would face it honestly. No more lies, no more deception, just truth and whatever love could survive in its wake. The storm was coming. She could feel it in her bones. But for this weekend, she was going to pretend the sky was clear. Chapter 3. The drive to the rural community center took 3 hours through increasingly pastoral landscape. Bennett drove while Louisa sat in the passenger seat, watching the city give way to farmland and feeling like they were entering a different world. One where detective work and investigations didn't exist. They talked about everything and nothing. Bennett told her stories about Tyler's childhood, about his brother who died too young, about the guilt he carried for surviving. Louisa shared carefully edited versions of her own past, giving him truth wherever she could. The loneliness of foster care, the determination to make something of herself, the fear that she was fundamentally unlovable. You're not, Bennett said firmly. Unlovable, I mean. You're extraordinary. You barely know me. I know enough. He glanced at her. I know you're fierce and protective. I know you're brilliant at your job and terrible at accepting compliments. I know you make this little humming sound when you're concentrating, and you bite your lip when you're trying not to laugh. He reached over and took her hand. I know I want to learn everything else there is to know about you. Louisa's throat felt tight. What if there are things about me that change how you feel? There won't be. But if there are, he was quiet for a moment. Then we'll deal with them together. That's what people do when they care about each other. They face the hard things instead of running from them. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think that when she finally confessed the truth, he'd understand, would forgive her. But she also knew that trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild. They arrived at the community center in early afternoon. It was smaller than the main foundation facility, but beautifully maintained, sitting on several acres that included a playground, a community garden, and a small cabin for visiting staff. Gloria Hayes was waiting, her warm smile and maternal energy immediately putting Louisa at ease. She gave Bennett a hug that spoke of genuine affection, then turned to Louisa with appraising eyes. So you're the one who's got our Bennett all twisted up, Gloria said with a knowing smile. Gloria, Bennett protested, but he was grinning. I call it like I see it, baby, and I see a man who's finally letting himself be happy. She took Louisa's hands. He's special. Don't take that lightly. I won't, Louisa promised, meaning it with everything she had. Gloria showed them around the center, introducing them to families whose lives had been transformed, single mothers who'd found stable work, veterans who'd found housing and community, children who'd found safety and education. Each story reinforced what Louisa had already learned. Bennett Collier was the real deal. This is why I do it, Bennett said as they watched children playing in the late afternoon sun. These families, these real tangible changes, this is what matters. Louisa leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're making a real difference. We're making a difference, he corrected. You're part of this now, too. The words settled warm in her chest, and she let herself imagine it might be true. Evening came with unexpected weather reports, a severe storm system moving in faster than predicted, bringing torrential rain and potential flooding. The inn where they'd planned to stay lost power. Roads were becoming impassable. Gloria decided to stay with a family she knew in town, which left Bennett and Louisa with the small cabin on the center's property. There's only one bed, Bennett said as they surveyed the cozy space. A fireplace, a kitchenette, a bathroom, and one bedroom with a bed meant for couples. I can sleep on the couch. Don't be ridiculous, Louisa said, her pulse already quickening. We're adults. We can share a bed. Are you sure? She looked at him, this man who'd somehow become essential to her, and nodded. I'm sure. The storm hit with dramatic force, rain lashing against the windows and thunder shaking the small structure. They built a fire, found wine in the cabin's supply closet, and settled on the couch with flickering flames, providing the only light besides occasional lightning flashes. This is nice, Bennett said quietly. Being here with you. No distractions, no responsibilities. Just us. Just us, Louisa echoed, and the simplicity of it felt profound. They talked as the storm raged outside. Bennett told her about his ex-fiancée, about how she'd accused him of loving his mission more than her. Was she right? Louisa asked. Maybe, or maybe we just weren't right for each other. He turned to look at her. But with you it's different. You understand why the work matters. You don't ask me to choose because you see how they're connected. The foundation is part of who you are, Louisa said. Asking you to give that up would be asking you to be someone else. Exactly. He touched her face, fingers tracing her cheekbone with reverent attention. You get me in a way she never did. In a way I didn't think anyone could. I'm falling for you, Louisa admitted, the words tumbling out. I know it's fast and complicated, but I'm falling for you, Bennett Collier. His expression shifted into something that looked like joy and relief mixed together. Thank God, he breathed, because I'm already gone, have been since that first night. He kissed her, and this kiss was different from all the others, slower, deeper, full of promise and inevitability. They'd been building toward this moment since the day they met. All the restraint, all the professional distance, all the careful boundaries were dissolving in the heat of this fire-lit room. Louisa, Bennett said against her mouth, I want you, but I need you to be sure. Need you to know that this isn't just physical for me. This means something. It means something to me, too, she whispered. More than I can explain. He pulled back to look at her, and in his eyes she saw her future. Saw love and trust and everything she'd convinced herself she didn't deserve. Then stay with me tonight. Really stay. Yes. They moved to the bedroom with hearts racing. Clothes fell away slowly, giving each other time to memorize the reveal of skin. Bennett touched her like she was art, tracing the curves of her body with such focused attention that she felt seen in a way she never had before. You're beautiful, he said, voice rough with want and tenderness. So are you. He lowered her to the bed and they came together with a slowness that felt almost sacred. Every touch was deliberate, every kiss was a promise. The connection between them was more than physical. It was emotional, spiritual, the meeting of two people who'd found something unexpected and precious. I've never felt like this, Bennett admitted as they moved together, his forehead pressed to hers. Never trusted someone enough to be this vulnerable. Neither have I, Louisa breathed, and it was true. She'd spent her entire life keeping people at a distance, convinced that vulnerability equaled weakness. But here, now, with Bennett, being open felt like strength. They made love with the storm raging outside and the fire crackling beside them, creating their own warmth against the chaos of the world. Time seemed to stop existing. There was only sensation and emotion and the profound sense of rightness. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms with her head on his chest, Louisa felt tears slide down her cheeks. Bennett noticed immediately, tilting her face up with gentle fingers. What's wrong? Nothing, she said, and then, everything. This is perfect, and I don't want to lose it. You won't lose it. You won't lose me. Promise? I promise. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Whatever comes, we face it together, okay? Okay. They fell asleep tangled together, the storm's fury softening to steady rain. In the morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, and Louisa woke to find Bennett watching her with such open affection that it made her chest ache. Good morning, he said, brushing hair from her face. Morning. They made love again in the soft dawn light, slower and sweeter than the night before. Then they showered together, made breakfast with the cabin's limited supplies, and spent the morning wrapped up in each other like they could hold back reality through sheer force of will. But reality was waiting. Louisa's phone, which she'd silenced for the weekend, showed 15 missed calls from Detective Walker. The messages grew progressively more threatening. She stared at the phone, then at Bennett, who was making coffee, humming something off-key. She'd made her choice. Now she had to live with it. "You okay?" Bennett asked, noticing her expression. "Yeah, just work stuff." "Anything I can help with?" "No, I've got it handled." They drove back to the city in the afternoon, hands linked across the console, neither wanting the weekend to end. But as the skyline came into view, Louisa felt the weight of her deception returning. She'd handed in her resignation, but she hadn't told Bennett the truth, hadn't explained who she really was and why she'd come into his life. Have you ever been caught between your head and your heart? When doing the right thing meant hurting someone you love? Drop a comment about a time you faced an impossible choice, and don't forget to subscribe so you can see how Louisa navigates this heartbreaking situation. Monday morning brought the reckoning Louisa had been avoiding. She arrived at the foundation to find Detective Walker in the lobby with 2 other officers. "Detective Chambers," Walker said formally, and she saw Bennett's head snap up from across the room. "You're under investigation for dereliction of duty and insubordination. You need to come with us." The world seemed to slow down. Bennett was crossing the lobby, confusion and concern written across his face. Leo appeared from his office, expression darkening. Staff members were staring, and Louisa stood frozen, watching everything she'd built crumble in real time. "Detective," Bennett said, voice barely above a whisper. "What is he talking about?" She looked at him, saw the moment understanding began to dawn, saw trust transforming into betrayal in his eyes. "Bennett, I can explain." "You're a cop?" His voice was hollow. "This whole time you've been investigating me?" "Not anymore. I resigned. I refuse to—" "How long?" he interrupted. "How long have you been lying to me?" "Since the beginning. But everything between us is real, I swear." "Everything between us is built on lies." His face had gone pale. "You used me. You made me trust you, made me fall for you, and it was all fake." "It wasn't fake." Her voice broke. "My feelings are real. Everything I feel for you is real." "How am I supposed to believe anything you say?" Bennett took a step back, and the physical distance felt like a chasm. "I told you things I've never told anyone. I let you into my life, into Tyler's life, and you were just gathering evidence." "I was trying to protect you. When I realized you were innocent, I stopped the investigation. I gave up my career to keep you safe." "I don't need your protection." His voice rose, anger finally breaking through the shock. "I needed your honesty. I needed you to be who you said you were." "Mr. Collier," Walker interrupted, "we have evidence of financial irregularities in your foundation. We'll need you to come down to the station for questioning." "What?" Louisa spun on Walker. "That's not— Carolyn Westbrook is the one committing fraud. I gave you all the evidence. Evidence obtained through your unauthorized continuation of an investigation you'd been ordered to close." Walker's smile was cold, which makes it inadmissible. "We're back to square one, and the DA still wants Collier." Horror crashed through Louisa. She'd thought resigning would end the investigation. Instead, her refusal to plant. Evidence had just made Walker more determined. "You can't do this," she said desperately. "He's innocent. I have documentation proving—" "You have nothing," Walker said flatly. "You lost your authority to investigate when you resigned. Now, step aside or I'll have you arrested for obstruction." Bennett was staring at her like she was a stranger. Worse, like she was an enemy. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't defend me. Don't pretend you care. Just don't." "Bennett, please listen. I trusted you." His voice broke on the words. "And you were lying the entire time." "Not about my feelings. Never about that." "How am I supposed to know what was real and what was part of your investigation?" He looked at Walker. "Let's get this over with. I have nothing to hide." As Bennett walked toward the door with the officers, he paused beside Louisa. For a moment, she thought he might say something, might give her a chance to explain. Instead, he looked through her like she didn't exist and kept walking. Leo appeared at her side. "You need to fix this," he said quietly. "Whatever you did, whatever happened, you need to make it right." "I don't know how." "Figure it out. Because he's the best man I know, and he doesn't deserve this." Louisa stood in the lobby as staff members whispered and stared, feeling the full weight of what she'd done. She'd tried to protect Bennett, but all she'd accomplished was hurting him worse. She pulled out her phone. "Rochelle, it's Louisa. I need help, and I need a place to stay because I just destroyed my entire life." The next few days passed in a blur. Louisa stayed with Rochelle, who listened to the whole story without judgment. "So you're a cop who fell for the guy you were investigating," Rochelle summarized. "You quit your job to protect him, and now he won't talk to you because you lied. That about covers it. You made mistakes, but your heart was in the right place." Rochelle poured them both wine. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Louisa spent the week building her case against Carolyn Westbrook from scratch, using only publicly available information that didn't require detective credentials. She documented everything meticulously, built a paper trail that would stand up in court, and prepared a presentation that would clear Bennett beyond any doubt. She also discovered that Walker had gone beyond pursuing Bennett. He was actively suppressing evidence of Carolyn's guilt. Walker wasn't just politically motivated. He was protecting Carolyn, who had connections that could advance his career. Meanwhile, Gloria Hayes showed up at Rochelle's apartment with food and wisdom. "That boy is hurting," Gloria said without preamble. "Won't eat, won't sleep, walks around that foundation like a ghost." "I know, I'm trying to fix it." "Trying isn't good enough. You love him?" "Yes." "Then you fight for him, you hear me? You don't give up just because things got hard. Love is work, baby. It's showing up even when you're scared, even when you've messed up, even when you don't know if you'll be forgiven." "What if he can't forgive me? Then at least you'll know you tried. But that man loves you too, even if he's too hurt and angry to admit it right now." Gloria's words stayed with Louisa as she finalized her evidence. She couldn't fix the lies, couldn't take back the deception, but she could protect Bennett and the foundation, could prove his innocence so thoroughly that no one could ever question it again. The foundation's annual gala was scheduled for Friday night. Carolyn would be there, along with board members, major donors, and press. It was the perfect opportunity. If she could get in, if Bennett would listen, if she could pull this off without making everything worse. Thursday afternoon, Leo Morelli called her. "I shouldn't be talking to you," he said. "Bennett would kill me if he knew, but I've been doing my own digging, and I think you're right about Carolyn." "You believe me?" "I believe your evidence, which is why I'm telling you that you need to be at the gala tomorrow. If Carolyn makes her move to discredit him, we need to be ready." "He won't want me there." "Probably not, but do you love him enough to show up anyway? To fight for him even when he doesn't want you to?" Louisa thought about Gloria's words. "Yes, I'll be there." "Good. Because he needs you, even if he won't admit it." Friday evening, Louisa stood outside the gala venue in a dress she'd borrowed from Rochelle, holding a folder with all her evidence, trying to gather courage to walk inside. She walked into the ballroom and immediately found him across the room, looking devastatingly handsome in a tuxedo and absolutely miserable. Their eyes met, and she saw the flash of pain before he looked away deliberately. Tyler was beside him, and the teenager's expression was confused and hurt. Before she could approach Bennett, Carolyn Westbrook took the stage with a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carolyn said, "I have an unfortunate announcement. Recent financial audits have revealed serious irregularities in the Collier Foundation's accounts. Specifically, evidence suggesting that Mr. Collier has been diverting funds to offshore accounts." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Bennett's face went white with shock. And Louisa realized Carolyn wasn't just defending herself. She was going on the offensive. "These are serious allegations," Carolyn continued, "and while it pains me, my duty as a board member requires transparency. I'm calling for an immediate investigation and suspension of all foundation operations." "That's interesting." Louisa's voice cut through the room as she strode toward the stage. "Because I have evidence that you're the one who's been stealing from this foundation for the past 2 years." Every head turned to her. Bennett's expression was unreadable. Carolyn's smile faltered. "Ms. Chambers," Carolyn said coolly, "you're no longer affiliated with this foundation. You have no authority here." "Actually, I'm a detective with the Financial Crimes Unit, or I was until I resigned rather than participate in framing an innocent man." Louisa pulled out her folder. And I've spent the past week documenting your crimes in excruciating detail. She projected her evidence on the screen behind Carolyn, showing the money trail from the board members' accounts, showed the falsified documents Carolyn had created to implicate Bennett, showed communication between Carolyn and Detective Walker, coordinating to build a case against Bennett while hiding her own theft. You've been skimming administrative costs for 2 years, Louisa said, her voice carrying authority. Small amounts you thought no one would notice, and when the foundation attracted law enforcement attention, you decided to frame Bennett Collier rather than face consequences. This is preposterous, Carolyn sputtered. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. Bank records, email correspondence, witness statements from staff who noticed irregularities but were afraid to report them. Louisa looked out at the crowd. Bennett Collier is innocent. He's always been innocent. And I can prove that too. Security was already moving toward Carolyn. Leo appeared at Louisa's side with federal agents who'd been investigating corruption in Walker's unit. As Carolyn was escorted out, protesting and threatening, Louisa finally allowed herself to look directly at Bennett. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. She walked off the stage and straight to him, not caring that everyone was watching. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for lying, for deceiving you. For every moment I let you believe I was someone I'm not. But I need you to know that my feelings were always real. Everything between us, the connection, the love, all of it. That was never part of the investigation. That was just us. Bennett's jaw worked like he was trying to find words. You quit your job, he finally said, to protect me. I refused to plant false evidence, refused to destroy an innocent man for political gain. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Why? Because you're a good man doing important work, and the world needs more of that. Because Tyler needs you. Because hundreds of families depend on this foundation. She took a shaky breath. And because I love you. I know I have no right to, know I destroyed your trust, but I love you anyway. The ballroom was completely silent. Tyler was crying. Gloria was smiling. And Bennett was looking at Louisa like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. You lied to me, he said, and she could hear the pain underneath. I did. Made me believe you were someone else. I did that too. But you also protected me, gave up your career, fought for me even when I told you not to. Yes. He stepped closer. How do I trust you again? How do we come back from this? I don't know, Louisa admitted. But I want to try. If you'll let me. If you can find a way to forgive me for the lies and see the truth underneath them. What truth? That I love you. That everything I felt, everything we built together, that was real. My name and my job were lies, but my heart never was. Bennett raised his hand like he was going to touch her face, then let it drop. I was so angry, so hurt. I know, you had every right to be. But I also couldn't stop loving you, couldn't make myself hate you even when I wanted to. His voice broke. You broke my heart, Louisa. Tears streamed down her face. I know, I'm so sorry. But you also saved my life, saved the foundation. He pulled her into his arms and she collapsed against his chest, sobbing. His hands were shaking as they held her. I don't know how we fix this, don't know how we rebuild trust, but I want to try. Because losing you these past few days was worse than anything. I'll spend the rest of my life earning back your trust, Louisa promised, however long it takes. He pulled back to look at her. What's your real name? Your full actual name? Detective Louisa Marie Chambers, 35 years old, orphaned at 8, foster care until 18, joined the police force at 21 because I wanted to protect people the way no one protected me. She touched his face. And I fell in love with you approximately 2 weeks into the investigation, which is why I couldn't go through with destroying you. Louisa Marie, he repeated softly, it suits you. You're really going to forgive me? I'm really going to try, because you're right. What we had was real. And I'm not ready to give that up, he kissed her forehead. But we're going to have to work at this, at rebuilding what your lies damaged. I know, and I will. I promise. Around them, the gala attendees applauded. Tyler pushed through the crowd and hugged them both fiercely. "Don't ever scare me like that again," the teenager said. "Either of you." "We won't," Bennett promised, including Louisa in the word we like she belonged there. Gloria appeared next, pulling Louisa into a hug. "Told you love was worth fighting for." Leo approached more cautiously. "So, Detective, that's going to take some getting used to." "Former detective," Louisa corrected. "I resigned, remember?" "Actually," one of the federal agents interjected, "we'd like to talk to you about that. Your investigation into Westbrook was exemplary, and your refusal to participate in corruption demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity we need. We're cleaning house in the financial crimes unit, and we could use someone like you." Louisa looked at Bennett, who squeezed her hand. "It's your decision," he said. "Whatever you choose, I'll support it." She thought about returning to law enforcement with her integrity intact, about continuing to fight for justice the right way. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take your time." The rest of the gala passed in congratulations and questions, and Bennett keeping his hand linked with hers like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. They stayed until the end, presenting a united front. Late that night, at Bennett's penthouse with Tyler asleep in his room, they finally had a chance to really talk. "I want to know everything," Bennett said as they sat on his couch. "Your real history, your real family, everything you couldn't tell me before." So Louisa told him. About her mother dying of cancer when she was 8, about the foster homes that ranged from neglectful to abusive, about teaching herself to fight because no one else would protect her, about joining the police force with idealistic dreams of being one of the good guys, only to discover that corruption existed everywhere. "I thought if I just followed the rules, if I was good enough, I could make a difference," she said. "But then Walker ordered me to plant evidence, and I realized the system was broken too." "So you walked away?" "I chose you over the system, over my career, over everything I'd built my identity on." She met his eyes. "I'd do it again without hesitation." Bennett pulled her close. "What happens now?" "I don't know. Figure out if I want to go back to law enforcement. Figure out how to rebuild your trust." She paused. "Figure out if you really want someone as damaged as me in your life." "You're not damaged. You're a survivor." He kissed the top of her head. "And I absolutely want you in my life, in Tyler's life, in all of it." "Even though I lied?" "You lied about your name and your job, but everything that mattered, your heart, your values, your feelings, those were real." He tilted her face up. "I'm not saying it doesn't hurt. I'm not saying we don't have work to do, but I'm saying you're worth it. We're worth it." She kissed him, and it felt different than before. Deeper, more honest, built on truth instead of deception. They made love that night with a new understanding between them, with all the walls finally down and nothing left to hide. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Louisa felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or just the certainty that she'd finally found where she belonged. "I love you, Louisa Marie Chambers," Bennett whispered into the darkness. "I love you too, Bennett Collier. The real me loves the real you. That's all that matters." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in her entire life, Louisa didn't feel alone. Chapter 4. The weeks following the gala were a study in rebuilding, not just trust between Louisa and Bennett, but the foundation's reputation and operations. Federal agents continued their investigation into Carolyn Westbrook and Detective Walker, uncovering a network of corruption that went deeper than anyone had suspected. Carolyn had been skimming funds for years, and Walker had been protecting her in exchange for career advancement connections. Both were facing serious charges. Meanwhile, the Foundation's books were audited and cleared completely. Every penny was accounted for, every program legitimate. Bennett's reputation was not only restored, but enhanced by the revelation of how far someone had been willing to go to frame him. Through it all, Louisa and Bennett navigated the complicated terrain of healing from betrayal while building something real. They set ground rules. Complete honesty always, even when it was hard. Regular check-ins about feelings and fears. Therapy, both individual and couples, to process the trauma of deception and work through the trust issues that lingered. It wasn't easy. There were moments when Bennett would look at her and she'd see doubt flicker across his face, wondering if she was hiding something else. Times when she'd catch herself editing her words before speaking and have to force herself to say the whole truth instead. The damage from her lies hadn't disappeared just because they loved each other, but they were trying, really trying. Louisa took the job with the federal agency, joining a task force dedicated to rooting out corruption in law enforcement. It felt right, using her skills to fix the broken system rather than abandoning it entirely. Bennett was proud of her, told her constantly how much he admired her integrity and courage. Tyler adjusted to the truth about Louisa's identity with the resilience of youth. "So you're like a secret agent?" he'd asked when they finally sat down to explain everything. "More like a detective who fell in love with her target," Louisa had corrected. "That's even cooler." Tyler had hugged her. "I'm glad you're sticking around. You make Uncle Bennett less boring." The foundation thrived. When Bennett returned full-time, Louisa joined officially as Director of Financial Oversight, using her investigative skills to ensure the foundation's operations remained transparent and above reproach. Working together brought its own challenges. There were disagreements about policies and procedures, moments when their different approaches clashed. But they'd learned to argue productively, to respect each other's expertise, to compromise without resentment. Gloria Hayes became Louisa's unexpected mentor, teaching her about the communities the foundation served. "You got a good man there," Gloria would say regularly. "But don't let that fool you into thinking relationships are easy. Marriage is work, baby, every single day." "We're not married," Louisa would protest. "Yet?" Gloria would reply with a knowing smile. 3 months after the gala, Bennett invited Louisa back to the rural community center. Just the two of them, no crisis this time, just a weekend to reconnect away from the city's pressures. They arrived on a Friday evening to find the cabin prepared, fireplace stocked with wood, kitchen stocked with food, bed made with fresh linens that smelled like lavender and sunshine. Bennett had arranged everything. "This is where it all changed," he said as they stood on the porch watching the sun set over the fields. "This is where I fell completely in love with you. Even though half of what I told you was lies, the important parts were true." He turned to face her. "Your feelings, your passion for justice, your courage, those were real, and those are what I fell for." They spent the weekend talking through everything they hadn't had time to process before. Louisa told him about the moment she'd realized she couldn't go through with the investigation, about the fear and exhilaration of choosing him over her career. Bennett told her about the devastation he'd felt when he learned the truth, about the anger and hurt and the lingering fear that she'd leave when things got hard. "I won't leave," Louisa promised. "I'm done running from things that scare me. Even when I have bad days, when the trust issues flare up and I get suspicious over nothing, especially then, we work through it together." Saturday evening, as they sat by the fire like they had that first stormy night, Bennett pulled out a small box. Louisa's breath caught. "Bennett, this isn't what you think," he said quickly. "Or maybe it is. I don't know. I'm terrible at this." He opened the box to reveal a delicate necklace with a small key pendant. "This is a key to my penthouse, to my life, to everything I am." She stared at the necklace, tears already forming. "You're giving me a key? I'm asking you to move in with me, with us, Tyler and me, to be part of our family officially." He took the necklace out and fastened it around her neck. "I know we're still rebuilding trust. I know we have work to do. But I also know that I want you there every morning when I wake up and every night when I go to sleep. I want to build a life with you, Louisa, if you want that too." "I want that," she whispered, "more than anything." He kissed her, and it felt like coming home. They made love that night with a new sense of permanence, of commitment that went beyond passion into the realm of choosing each other every single day. "I was thinking," Bennett said afterward, both of them tangled in sheets and contentment, "about getting a dog. Tyler's been asking for years, and I kept saying no because I was too busy. But now, with you helping manage things, maybe we could handle it." "A dog?" Louisa laughed, delighted by the domestic normalcy of it. "What kind?" "I don't know, something big and protective, like you." She shoved him playfully. "I'm not that protective. You literally quit your job rather than let someone frame me. You're extremely protective." Okay, fine. I'm protective. She snuggled closer. A dog sounds perfect. We can let Tyler pick. They returned to the city Sunday evening to find Tyler waiting with a PowerPoint presentation on the best dog breeds for their family. Bennett and Louisa exchanged amused glances as the teenager launched into his research. I've already identified 3 potential candidates, Tyler said, showing them photos. This one's a German Shepherd mix, very smart and loyal. This one's a lab, super friendly. And this one's a mutt, but the shelter says she's incredibly gentle and would be perfect for a family. How did you even know we were discussing this? Bennett asked. Tyler grinned. I have my sources. Also, Louisa mentioned it might be a possibility when she helped me with my college essay last week. Louisa tried to look innocent. Did I? Traitor, Bennett said, but he was smiling. Fine, we can look at rescue dogs this weekend, but you're responsible for walking and training. Deal. Tyler fist-pumped the air, then hugged them both. This is the best family ever. The word family settled warm in Louisa's chest. She'd spent most of her life believing family was something other people had, something she'd never be part of. And here she was, being welcomed into Bennett and Tyler's world like she'd always belonged there. Moving in was a process of merging lives and histories. Louisa didn't have much. Foster care had taught her to travel light, but what she did have was precious. Photos of her mother from before she got sick, the acceptance letter from the police academy, a worn copy of Jane Eyre that had been her comfort through countless foster homes. Bennett found her crying over that book one evening, and instead of asking what was wrong, he simply held her until the tears passed. She read this to me, Louisa finally said, touching the book's cover. My mom, every night before bed, even when she was too sick to sit up. We never finished it. She died before we got to the ending. Then we'll finish it, Bennett said, together. You can read it to me and we'll see how Jane's story ends. So they did, trading off chapters in the evenings, curled up on the couch with Tyler occasionally joining them to mock their dramatic readings. When they reached the end, when Jane and Rochester finally found their happiness, Louisa cried again. But this time they were good tears, healing tears. Your mom would be proud of you, Bennett said, wiping her cheeks. The woman you've become, the work you do, the life you're building. I hope so. They adopted the mutt from Tyler's presentation, naming her Justice because Louisa insisted, and Bennett thought it was perfect. Justice turned out to be an 80-pound goofball who thought she was a lapdog and had a talent for stealing food off counters. This is domestic bliss? Bennett asked one evening, trying to extract his shoe from Justice's mouth while Tyler laughed and Louisa took photos. This is exactly domestic bliss, she confirmed. They settled into routines. Sunday morning pancakes that Bennett made while Louisa handled coffee and Tyler set the table. Foundation board meetings where they sometimes disagreed professionally, but always backed each other up. Evening walks with Justice through the neighborhood. Friday movie nights where Tyler picked increasingly terrible action films. And through it all, they kept rebuilding. Kept choosing honesty over comfort, vulnerability over protection, truth over easy lies. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments and misunderstandings and moments when old wounds would reopen, but they worked through them together. One evening, almost a year after the gala, Leo cornered Louisa in her office. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble. For what? For being suspicious of you from the start, for not trusting you. You were trying to protect him the whole time, and I couldn't see it. You were protecting him too, Louisa said. That's what people who love him do. Leo nodded, then smiled. He's going to ask you to marry him soon. Just thought you should know. Her pulse skipped. How do you know? Because he's been carrying a ring around for the past month, waiting for the perfect moment. Leo's expression turned serious. Will you say yes? Of course I will. Good. Because if you hurt him again, I will make your life a living hell. I know. And I deserve it. The proposal came on an unremarkable Tuesday. They just finished a long day at the foundation, were walking home through the city with Justice trotting beside them, when Bennett suddenly stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Marry me, he said. Louisa blinked. What? I've been trying to plan the perfect proposal for weeks. Candlelight dinners, romantic getaways, elaborate speeches, but nothing felt right because we're not a perfect love story. We're messy and complicated, and we started with lies. He pulled out a ring box. But we're also real. and we're worth fighting for. And I want to spend the rest of my life fighting for us. So marry me, Louisa Marie Chambers. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real." She looked at the ring, simple and beautiful, exactly her style, then at Bennett's face, which showed every emotion he was feeling without filter. Love and fear and hope all tangled together. "Yes," she said, "yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her right there on the sidewalk, while Justice barked excitedly and passers-by applauded. The ring fit perfectly. Everything felt perfectly imperfect. Tyler was waiting at the penthouse with champagne and a banner that said, "It's about time," which made them both laugh. They celebrated with takeout Chinese and terrible champagne, and Justice stealing egg rolls off their plates. "So when's the wedding?" Tyler asked. "We just got engaged," Bennett protested. "Yeah, but you've been together almost a year and a half. You're old. You don't have time to waste." "I'm 42, not ancient." "Ancient," Tyler confirmed cheerfully. They planned the wedding for 6 months out, keeping it small and intimate. Just close friends, foundation staff, and the families they'd helped over the years. Gloria insisted on helping coordinate, turning the event into a community celebration of love and second chances. The night before the wedding, Louisa couldn't sleep. She found herself on their balcony, staring out at the city and thinking about how far she'd come from that first night when she'd planted a camera in his office. Bennett joined her, wrapping a blanket around them both. "Cold feet?" "Warm feet. Very warm feet. Maybe too warm." She laughed shakily. "I keep thinking about all the ways I could have lost you. If I'd followed Walker's orders. If I'd been less brave or more cynical. If you'd been less forgiving. But you didn't follow orders. You were brave. And I forgave you because you were worth forgiving." He kissed her temple. "We found each other despite the lies, despite the investigation, despite everything working against us. That has to mean something. It means I'm the luckiest person alive. Second luckiest, I'm the luckiest." They stood wrapped together as the city lights glittered below, and Louisa thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The orphaned girl who learned to survive. The idealistic young cop who thought justice was simple. The detective who fell in love while undercover. The woman who chose truth over duty. The partner, the stepmother-to-be, the person who finally found home. All those versions had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this life she'd never imagined possible. The wedding was beautiful in its simplicity. They exchanged vows in the community center's garden, surrounded by flowers that beneficiaries had planted and tended. Gloria officiated, reading from a script that made everyone cry and laugh in equal measure. Tyler stood as best man, giving a speech about how Louisa had made their family complete. When Bennett slipped the ring on her finger and said, "I do," Louisa felt something inside her finally settle. This was home. This was family. This was what she'd been searching for her entire life without knowing it. At the reception, they danced under string lights while Justice supervised from the corner where Tyler had her on a leash. Beneficiaries came up to congratulate them, sharing stories of how the foundation had changed their lives. Federal agents who'd worked on cleaning up the financial crimes unit toasted their courage. Even Rochelle gave a speech about love conquering all, which made everyone cry again. Late in the evening, Louisa found herself alone for a moment, watching Bennett dance with Tyler to a ridiculous song. Her husband, her family, her home. Gloria appeared beside her. "You did good, baby girl. I got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. You fought for this, fought for him, fought for yourself, fought for the truth even when it was hard." Gloria squeezed her hand. "Your mama would be so proud." The words hit Louisa right in the chest and she blinked back tears. "Thank you. Now go dance with your husband, and remember that marriage is work. Every day you choose each other. Every day you show up. That's what makes it last." Louisa returned to Bennett, who pulled her into his arms with a smile that still made her pulse race. "Having a good time, Mrs. Collier?" "The best time, Mr. Collier." They danced until their feet hurt and their faces ached from smiling. When the evening ended, they drove home to their penthouse, to their life together, to the future they'd built from lies and truth and relentless honesty. In bed that night, tangled together as husband and wife, Bennett whispered, "I love you, Louisa Marie Collier. I love you too. The real me loves the real you for the rest of our lives. That's all I'll ever need. Because sometimes the person you're meant to become is discovered in the most unexpected places. Sometimes protecting others means first protecting your own heart, and sometimes love doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for courage to be real." Louisa Chambers, former foster kid, former detective, now wife and partner in building a better world, had learned that courage, had learned that being real was the greatest gift you could give to someone you loved, had learned that home wasn't something you found, but something you built, brick by brick, truth by truth, choice by choice. And in Bennett's arms, surrounded by the family they'd created and the community they served, she finally understood what she'd been searching for her entire life. She was home. Have you ever had to choose between duty and your heart? Have you ever discovered that the person you judged was exactly who you needed? Share your story in the comments below and let me know where you're watching from. If Louisa and Bennett's journey touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about love, redemption, and second chances. Tomorrow, we have another incredible story about finding love when you least expect it. Until then, remember, the truth may hurt, but it's also what sets us free.